Sure.
Let's do it. I want to go to Alex in Rhode Island. Alex, what's going on, man?
Hi, guys. You can hear me properly, right?
I can hear you just fine. What's up?
Okay. Sorry, the call screener's having a hard time hearing me. So I've been thinking a lot, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related to religion and matters of the supernatural, but a lot of times I have conversations with people, and they're not always precise or accurate in what they're talking about, and like some of it is kind of pedantic. Like I get mad when people call my dog Labradoodle and she's actually a golden doodle, and if I correct you multiple times on this sort of thing, it's like, well, do you not care about being as accurate and as well represented as possible with what you're going through and asserting what you're going through and relaying? It's really confusing to me, and I don't know if are these people being inaccurate and imprecise just with these minor things, or do they extend that with everything in their life? And I don't know if I should try to push people to, use more precise language. Like if you're unclear about something, make sure you really, voice that rather than just, talking about something in a way that asserts you actually know it if you don't.
Yeah, I immediately have an answer for this, and then I want to hear Kate. I know, but like this is, I have, the reason why I want to go first is because my experience with this is visceral. Because there's a video of me out there back when I was a Christian, and I'm talking to Anthony Magnabosco, and I described myself as an atheist. I said I was once an atheist before, and if you listen to the way I kind of described it, and even now looking back at my own experiences, I don't think most atheists would agree with me that I actually was an atheist. Now, nobody actually ever told me at the time, oh, you're not really an atheist. There's different terms and how people use this and stuff. I kind of figured that out on my own. But even just a baseline description of my experiences using that language kind of influence my worldview a bit. And I think you have a point of sometimes the way that we describe things and the words that we're kind of using, the imprecision kind of makes it hard for us to communicate the ideas that we want to communicate. When I talked with Anthony, he did a great thing with me, and he immediately started asking me about my definitions and how I was using it. And as long as he understood the way I was particularly using it in that context, he was able to make some ground with me. And he even pushed back a little bit. He's like, I wouldn't describe atheists that way, but that's okay. And then I kind of asked him, like, how would you describe it and stuff? And then we kind of had conversations about that. I think if you're going to talk to anybody, especially about real heavy topics like this, starting off the conversation by talking about definitions and talking about like how we're using these words and the precision is good, because that makes people kind of look into things more. When you're saying like, oh, there's other points of view that say something else, that's going to put in people's minds, oh, maybe I should look into this more. Maybe I'm not kind of describing things right. I know that's what happened with me. I can't say that's going to work for everybody, but like that kind of made a little push in my mind of, oh, maybe I don't know about as much about this as I kind of thought I did.
Some pretty visceral reactions to people being imprecise with their language too. I mean, I had to create the word apistivist because there was no way to say that I am someone who does not use faith to come to conclusions. That word just didn't exist, and I had to create it. And trying to explain to people that is part of my worldview, my mindset, without having the word was really difficult. And trying to explain to people that I'm an agnostic atheist and explaining to them that a more pedantic version of the word agnostic was actually more useful than the more traditional definition, it has caused a lot of conflict, not just for me personally, but throughout the entire atheist community. But I do think that it's been for the good that we've been a little more pedantic about some of these words, just because it helps us describe ourselves better. And some of you know I've had some arguments with people whose names I'm not going to say, specifically about the utility of these words. And it's been kind of a struggle. But at the same time, there's also a certain amount of moderation, because if you're too pedantic, you can really start to make people angry. But like I said, for me, it can be kind of visceral. When I hear people use a word incorrectly, some part of me is like, or even if there's multiple ways to use a word, but based on my upbringing, my culture, I use it a different way, it can still make me a little bit grouchy. And I have to hold myself back sometimes from correcting people. Like that I moved from New England to Washington State, to Seattle. And every time after I moved, I heard someone say pop instead of soda. Some part of me would just rebel. I'm like, pop is a nickname for dad, or what weasels do in songs. It's not fizzy sugar drinks, that's soda, right? Things like that can really kind of get under my skin. And maybe that's failing on my part, maybe not. But I try to not be too uber pedantic about it, because it can really make other people just as grouchy if you're correcting them all the time. So you really have to pick and choose your battles there. Yeah, I mean, okay, another one, because of we're in the sort of skeptic community. And so people are always talking about whether things have been proved or not, except nobody uses the word proved anymore. It's everything is proven now. And I actually found a graph that over time, the use of one versus the other has changed, that proven used to be used a lot less. And I don't know why. But in my world, if something is proven, it means it's tried and true. Like a trusted friend is a proven friend. But a theory or a hypothesis has been proved when you have the evidence and experiments to show that it is so, right? And I know a lot of people will get pedantic saying nothing is ever actually proved in science. It's just shown beyond reasonable doubt at the moment based on what we know already and all of that stuff. So again, pedantry can get you into some serious arguments with people.
Yeah. I wanted to bring something up before we got a chance to hear from you, Alex, but something we had learned in communication studies, and I was trying to look up because I couldn't remember the exact name. It's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and maybe you've heard of this before. And there's kind of two versions of this. The strong one is saying that our thought and linguistic categories determine our cognition in some way. So the fact that we didn't have language for something may not have actually been up in our minds as something that existed. And I think the example that I heard in my class was the concept of like marital rape wasn't as charged as much and wasn't as much of a thing in our culture until I think like it was the 1970s or something. And when that phrase started coming into use, suddenly like we started to charge people a lot more for these kinds of crimes, because there were so many people under the belief that like rape couldn't happen in a marriage, like in those kinds of relationships and stuff. And because we had the language to describe this phenomenon now, that people were kind of more cognizant and realizing of this. The weaker version says that our categories, our linguistic categories, are only influence our thoughts and decisions, don't actually make up the structure of how we understand things. And there's been research kind of both ways. I'm not an expert on this particular hypothesis, but I do know that it's something that people have actually been looking into. And I would say no matter what, words matter. Words are important. You should definitely figure out what those words are before you start using them. What do you think, Alex?
I think, because this is just something I found, is, there is a process of kind of training yourself to use more precise language to, get to the point of what you're saying, to, use terms that more accurately describe. I mean, nobody's born with that skill. And I think on some level, it's not too much to ask for people to be a little bit more careful about the words that they choose. I don't want to be cynical here, but one of the things that really ticked me off was when I was an undergrad still, my mother would represent my major as something that wasn't even offered as a major. It wasn't even like on the roster. And I'm like, are you just saying this to impress all your friends? So it seems like I'm doing something big and bold, even though technically, I'm doing one thing, but the label you're ascribing to it isn't even a possible label to give it. And, doing it once is like, okay, fine, maybe not a mistake. And then you keep repeating that same mistake. At a certain point, it's no longer an honest mistake. You are deliberately trying to mislead people. And I think there's a very fine line between, all right, this person got it wrong because, maybe they weren't totally familiar with it. Maybe it's the first time they heard of something and they're talking about it. Maybe information has changed since they first became familiar with it. And then I really want to make sure that people, trust me on this because I want to mislead them. And so I'm going to purposely say things that aren't completely correct or accurate. And then I'm going to go and, assert it in a way that makes people not go and fact check because, I'm sounding convincing enough about it where people are going to take my word for it, but I'm actually not. I used to do this all the time when I was a kid. I wasn't allowed to have roaches in the house, so I'd say, oh, those are beetles. They're not roaches because they look similar enough to most people. People, it's a weird thing. And, when I think about things with religion and, I think religion gets where it is by being wishy-washy because people will say like soul, spirit, and another essence, and they all supposed to mean the same thing, even though some people say they mean different things, and nobody has a concrete definition of it. It's all really frustrating stuff.
Oh yeah, like spiritual, right? That word just means absolutely nothing to me anymore. When someone describes themselves as spiritual, I don't know what that means. I really don't. And there's tons of other words like that too. As far as like faith is like we were kind of talking about before.
Yes.
Faith is an interesting one because, again, people are totally using different definitions when they're talking about faith.
I've had arguments with theists where they switch which definition of faith they're using mid-sentence. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. I think what it is, Alex, is it's a combination of things. I think there's definitely people out there who are trying to use the language and they think that they know it and they don't know it. And also it's just trying to express ideas that they have and they aren't doing it accurately enough. And that could be a problem too. If you don't a lot of people don't realize this, especially when we're talking about religious topics. Like, there's a lot of education that goes into the stuff that we kind of talk about. BionicDance and I didn't get into this just on the fly. Like, there's a lot of research and stuff that has to go into like understanding the philosophy and understanding religious history and stuff. And not everybody has that experience. In fact, most people don't. They're coming in from their cultural assumptions and their backgrounds and their and the religion that they grew up in, and that's kind of the lens by which they view the world. So, to me, I'm not as upset with other people when people are saying these kinds of, especially kind of ignorant things when it comes to like religious stuff, because I understand it took a lot to get from the person I was before to the person I was now, and if I can help somebody on that path to kind of at least be more informed about their decisions, right? Whether or not they're going to change their beliefs is another thing, but at least be more informed about what we're talking about when we have these conversations. I'm grateful to have those opportunities most of the time.
And like you say, people don't realize quite what goes into making this kind of content. I mean, sometimes people will quote someone out of context and hunting down the actual quote to find out what that person actually meant. I mean, not in my most recent video, but the video before that, this one dude quote mined like this geneticist, this atheist geneticist so hard that it completely changed the message of what he was saying. And I had to hunt down that quote and find it, which was not easy. And I have a video that just processed. I haven't uploaded it yet because I'm on this show. And the dude was quoting the Bible, and I had to get out exactly the chapter and verse, but not just the chapter and verse, but the version of the Bible he was using, because he wasn't using the King James, all of that stuff. And then, and that's nothing compared to the people who argue with creationists about evolution. I mean, they know more about science than I ever will, right? I mean, I'm when it comes to science, I'm more of a science fiction fan. I'm just saying, that's not my forte is science. And these people, they look so amazing to me. The amount of research they do, the knowledge they have, it's wild. And like the amount of effort that goes into making sure that we are not talking out of our butts. I mean, seriously, you should see behind the scenes. It's not the same as what you see on camera.
Yeah. And I'll say this, Alex, I think Yeah, patience in this case is a virtue. I'm thankful for the people that were patient for me when I was having these kinds of conversations with people who didn't straight up say I was an idiot, I was dumb, and everything I believe was stupid. Because, I mean, I read those comments eventually, right? Like that eventually happened. But the people that I got to have face-to-face conversations with, right, the most meaningful ones, were super helpful to me, even if I was wrong about, a lot of that previous stuff. I mean, obviously, I'm no longer a Christian, and I'm here now. I'm looking forward to improving my beliefs, as I think as we all should, about all kinds of topics and stuff. And I think we can't always make the assumption that the person that you're talking to, like, you just know more than them about that thing. I think engaging with them and seeing what their experiences are like. Bill Nye has that quote, I think, that says, like, everybody in the world knows something that you don't. I think that's attributed to him. And I love that quote because it's like, yeah, that's true. And that's a humbling thing. Even with the education I've received, there's plenty of people that are smarter than me, and plenty of people that just know more about all kinds of stuff that I wish I could know, just like BionicDance was saying. But
it's funny how sometimes you can be accused of being anything other than humble, despite the fact that you're telling people, here's stuff I know I don't know.
mm-hmm.
Right. And like you're saying, I can't make a conclusion on this. I can't give you a definitive answer because to do so would be hubris.
Mm-hmm.
And I've started putting bloopers at the end of my videos to show people how perfect I'm not. And also because it makes them laugh. But I mean, and then to be accused of having no humility, I'm like, dude, I just made myself look like an ass for you. How not humble am I over here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully, Alex, that answered your question. Was that good? We good, Alex?
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, we kind of talked for a while there, but I'm glad you called in. It was a great question, and thanks for calling. Hope to hear from you again.
Oh yeah, no problem. Have a good